There has to be more to work than just a paycheck. My name is Clément Frisoni, and I am passionate about how companies manage their human capital. This is Cambodia Workwise. Each episode, I will bring you insights from the Cambodian world of work with CEOs, HR managers, human capital deciders, and people who think there is more to work than just the 9-to-5 traditional work. In this show, we will talk about HR, recruitment, and the broader Cambodian world of work. This is Cambodia Workwise. You know that feeling when you start a new job? You have to get used to the new colleagues, the new products and services of the company, the new processes, and then there's all the rest. This is the specialty of Joe. Joe Black is the Culture and Operations Director at Pizza 4P's. Corporate culture, it's everything that defines how companies get around solutions and problems. This can be so much more than how we drink beers on Thursday nights with colleagues. This conversation with Joe got me so excited because I am a big fan of Pizza 4P's as a customer. But I wanted to find out how that culture of the restaurant translates into their operations. I hope this conversation will help you reflect on how things are being done in your company and how they could be done differently. So get comfortable and welcome to Pizza 4P's. Welcome on the show. How are you today?
I'm doing great, Clem. Thank you.
So today we're here to talk about you and the company you work for, Pizza 4P's. So could you maybe tell us a little bit more about you, who you are, and what does your company do for those of us who don't know Pizza 4P's?
Yeah, sure. So I guess I'll start, a little tiny bit of background with me. I guess usually I start this with saying my first love was operations. I've been an entrepreneur since I was 12. Started my first little company,
Okay.
Building and upgrading computers, and I just from there worked across several different industries, and I always loved the puzzle of how to put a company together so that it can grow. What I discovered, I guess, a long time ago is that the more people like what they're doing, the more that the company is able to just grow, or that they do better, that that things just work better when people like what they do. And so I got to put that into practice a lot with a landscaping company quite a while ago, and really start to focus on people. And we in that company was the first time I ever introduced a core value, which was integrity. And if anybody listening is familiar with the landscaping industry, integrity is not a well-known thing in it. But yeah, that was kind of my introduction into culture. And then I ended up moving to Vietnam. So I'm from the U.S. and I moved to Vietnam back in the very end of 2017 now. So I'm going on 7 years of being here. And yeah, I came over here after closing down our landscaping company and taking a year off to travel, and started working in a very, very culture-rich company where people just absolutely loved what they did and got that experience, and went through a couple other companies and eventually ended up consulting. And in my consulting journey, that's what led me to learn or work with Pizza 4P's. And Pizza 4P's is we're a pizza company. We have restaurants all over Vietnam. We're in 3 countries at the moment and 4 next week. So growing.
Okay.
Yeah, and we are, what I guess we're kind of known for is just we're one thing we really focus on is just keeping a more high end experience, but at a very reasonable price. So we want to be very, very accessible. And the name Pizza 4P's, if you say it very fast, you might start to understand what it means. But it's 4Ps apostrophe S, and it stands for 4 piece, like PEACE.
Yeah.
And so, the whole company was born out of tragedy. The owner's best friend committed suicide,
Oh,
and in order for
okay. I didn't
him,
know that.
okay, well, here's some news.
Okay. Okay. Okay.
But I love telling this part because it really kind of gives a background of what Pizza 4Ps is about. Because we're not about pizza, we really aren't. And so the story goes, he went through this tragedy, and in order for him to find his own inner peace, he actually started kind of bringing people together. And the way he did that was through pizza parties in his backyard. He actually built a pizza oven in his backyard. And he started throwing these parties, and he kind of, as he puts it, he found that happiness and peace that was already inside of him, by bringing it out in others. And that, long story short, turned into opening pizza restaurants. And so we've now become the largest kind of, you'd say, higher end F&B company in Vietnam, and we are expanding.
And so you started the journey in Vietnam. I think that's where you have the most restaurants at the moment. And in 2021, I believe, you opened your first restaurant in Phnom Penh in Cambodia, followed by another one in BKK, also in Phnom Penh. And now you are also, you mentioned 3 and soon 4 countries. So the third, I understood, is Japan. Okay, and you are opening in the 4th, which is India. Okay, Bangalore. So that's you're an international company all around Asia now. Good. So I got to know your restaurant first in Vietnam and then in Cambodia when I moved there. How do you define the culture? So maybe for the listeners who have, maybe let's start this way. For the listeners who have not been to your restaurants yet, as you mentioned, it's a very luxurious experience at an affordable price. So you are always greeted very warmly, at which for me, I associated to the Japanese heritage of the company, which is, I assume, where the founder is from. Okay. And you have that feeling of you are always welcome. The staff is here for all of your needs. So it's not any pizza restaurant. When you go there, it's not any restaurant. It's not any pizza restaurant. And you just sit there, and not only the food is delicious, but also there is that whole ambience mood around the place where you sit. So how would you describe the culture of Pizza 4Ps? Now that I've described it as a I would say user, no, as a consumer, how would you describe this from the inside, for the employees? How do you describe the Pizza 4Ps culture to the people who work there?
Well, let's see where to start with this. I would say probably the thing to probably start with is we are very culture forward, culture heavy. I got to know the owners consulting with them several years ago, and then ended up joining them full time after that. And so, as a culture consultant, you work with a lot of companies, and kind of what you do first is you really have to figure out where that company's at. Like you've got to meet them where they're at. And some companies, they're like, oh, we want to build a strong culture, but we have nothing. We have no vision. We have no mission. We have no values or anything. And so you start there. And some companies are farther along in that journey. And some companies, they have values, but they're things like efficiency and making lots of money. And, so then you have to say, well, maybe we need a culture refresh because that might not be the most motivating values. But Pizza 4Ps, I knew that they were very, very culture forward. They had fantastic values. They had a great mission and vision. Make the world smile for peace, and delivering wow and sharing happiness is their mission. And so I saw that from the outside. And so coming into Pizza 4Ps, I knew this is a great company. And I assumed that where they were at in their journey as far as the culture was that they've got a great setup. They've got a great structure for it, but maybe they just don't know how to get it out to their people. And that was what I first thought. And so my journey began by literally setting up 1 hour long one-on-one meetings with every manager in the company, in every department, every store. And we're not just stores. We also have delivery hubs and central kitchens and a cheese factory. And so it ended up being about 50 or 60 people that I had one-on-ones with. And what I discovered very quickly is that the culture is very, very much alive. And when I say alive, it means that people behave based on our values. And we have 4 values. And so they are, actually, I'll finish with that one. So we've got compassion, and we have authenticity. So those are our English ones. And then we have kaizen, which is basically continuous improvement. It's a Japanese word. And then we have omotenashi. And I think what you just said a little bit ago really speaks to that one. But omotenashi is the Japanese spirit of hospitality. But it's not hospitality. It is and it isn't. And what makes it so unique, and I think this is what might kind of answer a little bit of your question, is that omotenashi involves doing things because you want to bring out the happiness in other people. You know, and one of the great things about that is, like, you know, when you're coming from a place of omotenashi, it makes, you know, everything, you know, whether you're cleaning the toilet or you're making the food or you're restocking or doing inventory or, you know, like whatever you're doing, it might be a very menial task, but with that spirit of omotenashi in your heart, you know what you're creating and that experience that you're creating for the guests. And so the best way I can describe the culture at Pizza 4P's is that when I went on a trip to Hanoi to meet some of the managers up there, my first evening I was there, I booked a table at one of the 4P's up there. And when I got there, you know, I sat down with a bunch of my friends and, you know, we were eating, and a little bit into our meal, like most of the team came out and they kind of half circled around us, and they had a little plate with decorated chocolate on it and some dessert and whatever that said "Welcome to the team," you know, because I was brand new, and they all clapped and cheered for me, and, you know, and I was really blown away, and like it was just such a cool experience for me, and of course all my friends are like, wow. And I asked the area manager, I said, what did you tell the team, you know? And she said, well, I just told them Joe is coming, be omotenashi. And that was it. And I mean, that was like a blow my mind moment, because like that was so cool that all she had to say was be a core value, be a 4P's value. And the team knew what to do. And so like, that's the amazing thing, is that, you know, across 4P's, you get a very similar experience.
Yeah. That's something you notice across the countries, across the restaurant in the same country. It's very homogeneous. Yeah.
And I can tell you from my background being in operations, I can tell you that we don't have the structure of just hardcore rules to guide all of that. What we have is our values. And so people know how we treat each other and how we treat guests and what kind of experience they're expected to deliver. And the last piece I'll say on this before I, you know, throw it back to you for another question, but it just, it has to come first internally. And so we have a saying at 4P's: in order to make the world smile for peace, first we have to make our partners smile for peace. And
sorry, so partners is the name, is your what everyone else would call employees. You call them partners, right? Okay. Just okay. And so those values, they were here. They were interestingly, they were here present inside the team, but not formalized before you arrived, or it was formalized and you just expanded it and created more guidelines around it.
Yeah. So, okay, I guess, yeah, to sort of finish that whole thing. So after I got done with my like 60 interviews, the thing I figured out is that my job is not to spread the culture, it's to spread it faster. So what was happening was it's a fantastic role model leadership company. So, you know, the owners, I mean, like, you know, it's if you're familiar with like NLP or, you know, like really creating emotional connections to things, like the owner started from a place of deep emotional connection to helping others find their peace. I mean, in his story, if you ever hear it, he almost committed suicide himself. And so he really came from that place of like, I want to help others, you know, through their tough times, through, you know, like find their peace, find their happiness. And so he started with that in his heart, and it just naturally spread, you know. And there's something in culture consulting, we kind of, you know, we have like this sort of saying of like, every company's got culture. Most of it's by accident. You know? And so, you know, and most of it just directly reflects the owner. It's whatever their values are, whatever they hold important. And so this whole company was built on that sort of role model style leadership of like, this is what he wanted to deliver, and it was him and his wife that are the co-founders, but this is what they wanted to deliver. And so it just perpetuated out, but it was I love using the word through osmosis. But basically it was role model, like they would do it and others would follow and others would follow. And so that's the way it perpetuated. So what I learned was that unfortunately that's a little bit too slow for our expansion plans. So really my role is to figure out how do we get people really experiencing and absorbing the culture faster? How do we take like a 5-year process of someone, really becoming like, a true like heartfelt 4P's manager and cut that down to 2 or 3 years,
Yeah. And so how do you do it, Joe? What's your recipe?
Oh man. Oh God, there's a lot of stuff that goes into that. I don't know, like I'll just I'll talk about what we've done. And that's probably the best way to go. And one thing I will definitely say is, having worked with a lot of companies, like there's no one recipe for it. Every company is different. Every company works in a different way, and everything's going to be different. So, but some of the things, like one of the very first things I did, you have to listen to people. You have to find out what's important to them. And so, one of the very first things I did is I implemented a newer or a more, maybe call it modern, survey software. That allows I guess there's 3 main surveys it does, and they all have a different purpose. So the ideal thing that I wanted was to have the ability for every restaurant manager, every department head, to know what's going on with their team. And the software we were using was Google Forms, which is pretty common. It was a scale of 1 through 5, like it was basically like a ENPS, Employee Net Promoter Score, if you're familiar, where it asks you how likely you are to recommend working at Pizza 4P's. And it was just that was basically it. And then you can leave some extra feedback. That was the old survey. So what we implemented is now 3 surveys. One's a pulse survey. One is the ENPS, but the scale of 10 version. And then we also what we call a baseline survey. And then with this, it's all real time through this software. So every manager has access to it at any point in time. The pulse survey, which gives you like how are you feeling today? And you get immediate feedback on that. And so now a manager could look at that, and like I can speak from personal experience on this. I had an instance where it measures dissatisfaction. And there's always going to be some, like you can't get rid of it 100%. Like there's always going to be stress. There's always going to be dissatisfaction.
Yeah.
But one week it like spiked by 25%, and having this insight, I was able to talk to my team and just say, hey guys, like it's all anonymous. So I don't know, like, who's reporting what, but I was able to point at the numbers and go, hey, look at this. Like, here's what's happening. What's going on, and we were able to address the issue immediately. And the very next week, like it went back to normal, so it gets that like really in touch. It also gives an outlet. If you've never been to, or you haven't spent much time in Southeast Asia, especially Vietnam, and I know Cambodia is a bit like this too, but people are pretty shy. Like they don't speak up,
Yeah.
I come from a culture, in America where it's hard to get people to shut up.
Yeah.
But here it's quite different. So it gives them an outlet. Yeah.
Okay. And they take it.
It is. Yeah, and we get direct feedback on that. Like people actually say that in the survey that, that this is, there's actual mentions of like gratitude for the survey because they have a way to speak up, so that's really cool. But so we've got that immediate survey. We have an ENPS survey, which we do quarterly. And that one gives us guidance as to whether what we're doing is working. It's a simple question. Would you recommend working at Pizza 4P's? And then it asks you, why did you give that answer? And it's our main source of qualitative feedback. So that's where we get most of the written stuff. And so we can dive deeper into it. But it also, like, we know that, if that number is going up after a quarter, we know what we were doing that quarter is working. And if it goes down after a quarter, then we know that it's not working. And we've seen both some ups and downs, and, it does move around a little bit. But overall, the course of 2023, it has moved up. So that's a good sign.
That's good. Okay.
And our last one, I'll touch on this one briefly, but like is a baseline survey, and there's all kinds of surveys, Ipsos or Gallup or whatever, that tell you what Gen Z thinks is important in the workplace, and what Gen X thinks, and but none of those surveys can tell you what your company thinks is important. And so we ask. So this software, they worked with Utrecht University in the Netherlands. They did a 3-year study of hundreds of different companies, and they figured out 15 what they call drivers of what's really important in the workplace and what leads to overall happiness. And the beauty of the survey is it's very simple. We basically ask, how important is this to you? So it ranks it 1 through 15. And how satisfied are you with it? And that gives us 2 vital pieces of information. Number 1, we know how important it is, so we know what to focus on. Don't focus on the least important thing. Doesn't make sense. And we know if it's doing well or if it's not. So we can identify what are our strengths, and you always want to focus on your strengths. So we know that the connection people make between the other, like between partners, that's our most valuable thing. People love the people they work with. And so we focus on that, and we create more activities and more things and more ways to keep connecting people. But we also know, that, hey, we're F&B restaurant, we're a restaurant, and we know that workload, man, people are working a lot. They're passionate about what they're doing. And some people love the workload. But we know that one's a stressor. And so now we know, okay, here's something to address. But we know it. We know that's our people. We know the order of things that are important to them. So we're not taking a guess or basing it off a generation or something like that.
Yeah.
And every restaurant manager has access to this for their store. And that's the really cool thing.
So you can have maybe what happens in Hanoi is not the same as what happens in Japan or in Cambodia. Each restaurant has their own 15 important items that are ranked per restaurant.
Yeah. And it's really useful, because I mean, it is something that it's like, we're starting to do, like our culture team is starting to do coaching with some of the stores that are struggling, like with we call it the happiness score, but some of the stores that are struggling a little bit more. And, we're able to go into that store and easily just say, okay, well, here's what's important to your people. Here's, the qualitative feedback, there's high stress, and here's what the qualitative feedback points to, or whatever. But we're not just basing it off of like a company-wide survey. It's very targeted, very direct. So that's
you get a very
interesting level of action. And how, because with those when you ask your employees what's important for them, or how do they rank this, you get an answer, but is it always easy to link it with business results, with measurable financial KPIs? Because at the end of the day, you're still a company and you need to make profit. How do you conciliate all this? Make sure that you listen to your employees, but you go in a direction that makes sense it makes a corporate sense, if I may speak so.
Yeah, this is one that it's, how to put this, it's like my ultimate frustration, but yet it's like the because it's hard to directly link the results of culture engagement and things like that, and there's a lot of studies that will point to like the benefits, highly engaged employees, partners are, they're 21% more productive, they're 80% less likely to leave, they're like, you can look at the numbers and the statistics of it, but when it comes down to it, it's a very kind of like large scale effort that we're doing. And so sometimes it's hard to directly connect it to it, but that's also where things like this survey that we're doing, play a pretty big role. And so the easiest number that we impact on the culture team is the retention. And so that is our number one thing that we focus on, is that retention number. But at the same time, it does contribute to sales. It does contribute to overall like guest satisfaction. And like you can see things starting to shift as you make a difference in the overall happiness of your team. So our direct KPIs have to do with happiness, the ENPS score, the baseline metrics, but they do connect like to the bigger numbers, and it takes a while. Like this is not a short journey, and that's a thing that I think a lot of people kind of make a mistake on, is they think, oh, I'm gonna work on my culture for 6 months or 3 months or maybe a year or something like that, and I'm gonna I'm going to get it right and then I'm done,
Yeah,
but
it's it's more long term than that.
oh God, yeah. It's forever, really, realistically. But
Okay.
but typically, I mean, so Pizza 4Ps, we've got about 3,000 people. And in my experience, if you have a company with a few hundred people, you can kind of right your ship in, maybe 6 months or a year. Bigger companies with thousands of people, you're typically looking at a 3 to 5 year journey if you're trying to really make big impacts. You'll start to see results in the first year or two, but it's a long term commitment.
Yeah, and when you have such big employee numbers, you said 3,000 employees. When it's so hard to get everybody on the same page. You cannot get unanimity, get everybody to fit in. But when you recruit, when you expand your team, when you expand in a new country or open a new restaurant or just replace the staff that's leaving, do you look in the candidates for people who have the core values that you have inside them, or do you look for people who will be able to learn them easily, or do you look for people who will expand your culture? How do you make it work? Combining such high figures of employees and having that strong culture that you have.
Oh man. To answer this one, I'm actually going to go back and answer a little bit further on one of your previous questions and answer this one at the same time. Because I think you asked me what do we do? And so I started out with the survey answer, but another one that we do is we a lot of people think culture is a lot about team building and events and stuff like that. Some people think that's all it is. And it's not, it's behavior. And so team builders are great and doing stuff like that are fun, but but it boils down to the behavior. And so you asked me do we look for people that are, that have our same values or that, are, to that, no, because it's really rare. That doesn't really happen much where it's they have the same values. But what we do look for is we look for people that are excited about what we're up to. So, I think culture fit is more about people resonating with what you're doing and getting excited about it and being engaged by it than it is about necessarily having the same values. And the reason I bring up the events is because what we did, a major shift we did from 2022 to 2023 is we split our events into kind of a 50-50 focus, which is where we go 50%, we want it to be fun and still like the team builder, but we, even with that, we make sure that the team building events are still focused around values and that. And then we have 50% where it's getting something of value, whether that be a workshop or, something else, but we want people to walk away with it, creating a personal, emotional connection to our values or to our mission or to our vision, and getting an experience of them, not just hearing about it. Because it's one thing to know what is authenticity or what is Kaizen or what is Omotenashi, but to experience Omotenashi, to experience Kaizen, to experience authenticity. And so we create activities for people where they actually get to experience it and create it within these activities. And one of our events, we help people connect to their own personal values. And so I think the key when it comes to the recruiting is you do need to find a culture fit. And so the questions you want to ask when you're screening or when you're looking for people is you want to ask them about your values, but how they relate to them and how that makes them feel or what they think about or how they see themselves, fitting into that or aligning with it, to see if that's something that they resonate with. But then at 4Ps, we help people actually find their personal core values. And then we take it a step further and we help them connect their value to the company value. And we do an exercise where we say, okay, now you know your value and which company value kind of mirrors that a little bit or makes sense or kind of connects. Now, what actions can you take in your personal and work life that live both? And people then get connected that, oh, wow, when I come to work, I'm not coming to work just to, move the company forward. I'm coming to work and it's living my best life. It's moving what's valuable to me forward. And so it changes their relationship and dynamic with, why and what they're doing at work.
Mm-mm. So basically, you help them find a way to get even more excited about the work they do, about why they're here, about why is it important for them to be here. You create a path inside them to see that. Okay.
I mean, we're
Yes.
all at our heart, we're all at some point we're all kind of in it for ourselves.
Yeah.
And so, you want to know that like when I show up to work, it's not just for a paycheck. It's, it's moving my life forward too. And
Uh-huh.
so there's only so long, especially man, Gen Z, that's, all these studies and all these things are showing like, Gen Z is not interested in the paycheck, not nearly like previous generations were. And so like they want to know that they're part of something and that they're
Yeah.
getting value out of their workplace. And so, you know,
Yeah.
We're actually having another episode where I interview a Gen Z member, and she's sharing about how for her it's important to connect her work life and a personal life, that to lower the barrier between them, to blend them more together. So I think it really resonates with what you're saying about helping your employees finding their personal core values and to find them in the work they do at 4P's. Okay. So when you, let's say an HR manager, or I'm the owner of a company here, and I want to focus on culture. So you already told us it's a long-term commitment. It's not something you can do within a few months or a year. What would be your recommendations? The steps to take to be able to take stock of what is currently the situation in my company and to get somewhere. Should I, prepare my own values, what I want to achieve first, and then try to talk to the managers and find correlations? Or should I sit everyone around the table and try to find a common path together? How would you go about it, for outsiders who want to follow the same path as Pizza 4Ps?
yeah, I feel like you've got some experience here because you hit some things that, it's, I guess I'm going to lean on a little bit on the culture consulting side because like that's what I talked about earlier. It's like you got to meet every company where they're at. So
Mhm.
when it comes to that sort of thing, let's say for example, if I get like a HR manager that comes to me and says, "Hey, I'm really interested in culture and I want to build up the culture at my company." My first question or my first statement is, "Great, let's go talk to the CEO." you
Mhm.
know and if the response I get is well, he's not really that into it, but he knows that like a strong culture would probably build the company or make us more money or whatever, so he gave me budget for it, then I say,
Mhm.
well, good luck with your budget. I'm sorry, unfortunately there's not really much I can do. and
Mhm.
and it's kind of the like I hate that a little bit, and it's not to say that like if you're in that situation as an HR manager, don't give up, like it's not at all what I'm saying, but it makes a much tougher path for you, because it really is like people do what their leaders do. And so if you've got that high level leadership that's not leading by example, that says one thing and does another, it makes it really, really hard. And I feel like my heart goes out to every HR manager out there that like wants to make that impact, but is fighting against the leadership to do it. And
Mhm.
it's really unfortunate. So I think the very first thing, like if you're starting from nothing, there's no vision, there's no mission, there's no values, there's no like greater direction other than maybe this company was started to make widgets, and you're really good at making these widgets, and that's all it was ever started for, and now it's growing, and people need direction, they need like something's got to happen here, and you get an HR manager that's passionate about it. The first thing to do, honestly, is to start working with the leadership and dive in with them. And you've got to come up with that sort of like unified vision. And so you've got to start there. And in smaller companies, yeah, you want to involve everybody. If you've got a hundred or even maybe 200 people in the company or less, like it's a great idea to involve as many people as you can and get them in that creation process, because then it becomes a part of them, and they like when you helped create something, of course you want it to live, you want it to thrive, you want it to grow. um, versus if it's just sort of like, hey, here's our new vision, here's our new mission, here's our new values. But yeah, start in that creation process and get really clear on that, and get into that sort of stuff. I would say from there, it's going to vary a lot. But then it's a matter of like changing behavior. So it's like once you've gotten clear on like where you're going, like big picture. So, like we're making the world smile for peace at Pizza 4P's. You've got to work then on how does that live inside the company? What does that really mean? Because if it's just a saying, then it's a poster on the wall, or it's a little card you stick in your pocket, or like whatever some people do. But then you got to like really go to work on how does this live in what we're doing, and it has to live in the operations. So at Pizza 4P's, I mean, that it's easy to see it. If you've never been to a Pizza 4P's, I highly recommend it. As you shared, like you walk in, you're going to experience omotenashi. You're going to experience compassion. You're going to experience authenticity. Like it's easy to see it. But that's where you've got to go. Is you got to say, okay, now we've got these things. Like we figured out like what's important to us and where we want to go, and how we want to do it and how we want to treat each other. And you've got to start now figuring out how do we do that internally first. So you got to treat each other like that, and then how do we represent that to our guests, and really live it. If you talk about it, if authenticity or integrity or whatever is your value, then like how do you physically live it? And you've got to like set that up. And you want to work it into every piece of what you do. So, like in our training at 4P's, we focus very, very heavily in the why we do what we do, and which mostly just relates back to the values. So, if we say little things like, this is an example I've started to enjoy giving, but it's like little tiny things like, when you pick up something off the floor, bend down at the knees to pick it up, so that you don't have your rear end in the air, and and you're not sticking that in someone's face, because you don't know who's behind you. There might be someone who's about to propose to their wife, or there might be someone who's who's it's their birthday today, and you just stuck your butt in their face, And we can teach a partner to kneel down, but if we teach a partner to not create that bad experience, that we want to give omotenashi to that guest, and that we want them, to have the greatest experience and have a wow experience in the store, then it's not just how they bend down that they're going to change, because they've got that guidepost.
Yeah.
So you build it into
everything.
Yeah.
It's much more efficient in terms of like what you have to explain versus what they will, where it will be applied after. You have a much bigger range of applications. Okay.
Let me give one more little insight on this. So you go through that creation process, right? And you get everything. There's a very important step in there, and it's inspire. And so when you do this, through some of the training I've received, it's, you call, enrolling others in your possibility, or you call it, getting people engaged, but you have to go through that process of, getting people to really buy into it, and to really like, be excited as well about what you're up to. And you've got to spread that across your company. And so, and sometimes, especially if it's a new thing, like Pizza 4P's, I got lucky. It's a company that was culturally strong from the start, but not all companies are. And so that's a phase that sometimes, in bigger companies, that can take a year or two in itself, just to really get that embedded into the leadership and inspire them into that point where they want to live it too. And that can be like, but you've got to take that step, and you got to, do that inspire step, and how that rolls out for the frontline team members. It's like, it could be team builders or events, but it doesn't stop there. If you do a team builder and expect everybody to all of a sudden be magically different, it doesn't work like that, So your team builders, your events, your stuff like that, those are launch pads, but you've got to have some groundwork for like what you do in between. Otherwise, it all just gets forgotten and left at the event.
What's the carrot to investing in your corporate culture? What are the benefits that a company could expect from a strong corporate culture, of investing in it, spending time, resources on that? What does it bring? Do you have any examples of concrete achievements that this can get you?
I I don't know, which one are you looking for? Do you want like statistically speaking, because there's been tons of studies on this sort of thing, or are you talking about like specific maybe to 4Ps?
Well, I would say, because I understand it might, increase the sales or help retain employees. Do you have any figures in mind? And if not, what are the benefits that you experience at Pizza 4Ps for that?
Well, I can say like from, let's see, I guess the ones like when you talk about that, again, that's why it's so tough. Like, because sometimes it's hard to directly correlate, but like, we have, exceeded our sales goals for the year. And, to say that that's based solely on the culture, is a tough thing, but it is something that did happen. We did have a very focused effort on the retention goal. And so in our junior partners, we saw that climb about 10% in between. And that was the time frame there was the first 6 months that we were working on this. So I don't have our end of year measurement yet to like mark that again. But yeah, we saw about a 10% gain. Right now, because we do look at this monthly, I think we're up about another 6%. For the second half of the year. A lot of focused effort around, how we bring new people in, and how what we did discover through our measurement tool is that when people get in touch with our culture, when they really connect with it, they stay. And people who aren't connected with it, they don't stay. So we put a heavy focus on, like how quickly can we get them? And we created like a new culture orientation, and we've got, like a new onboarding program, and we've got, and we've got more coming, but there's a lot of effort into that, like very early days of someone's journey. And so like that was a big thing. And I think probably anybody that works in the F&B industry, it's a high churn industry. And so, how do you affect that? And that's one thing. It's like I talked about that Inspire thing earlier, but, inspire people and get them excited about what you're up to. Build on your strengths, which for us, it's the connections. So we try to really focus on that at the beginning. But yeah, retention definitely saw a climb. The other numbers that we look at, of course, the ENPS. ENPS, man, we had a huge jump in that in July. It actually shot up 12 points. But it was also like really close to some of our major events. And so I think that affected it. Overall, over the course of the year, we are up by 2 points in our ENPS score.
So, just for people who might not be familiar with ENPS, could you just explain us what it is and how it works and how you measure it?
Yeah, sure. It's as I shared earlier, it's a simple question. So there's NPS surveys, and just about anybody in the world at this point has probably at some point taken an NPS survey. It stands for Net Promoter Score. It's a scale of 1 through 10. They ask you the question, how likely are you to... and if it's a Net Promoter Score, it's probably, maybe it's the restaurant you're eating at. They ask you how likely are you to recommend eating here to your friends and family. So the ENPS, or Employee Net Promoter Score, is just flipping that and asking the question to the employee, to the partner in our case, how likely are you to recommend working at Pizza 4Ps? And it's a scale of 1 through 10. Now, the way that works is basically you've got your 9s and 10s, and those are what they call your promoters. Promoters are the people that if they get asked that question, they immediately, yes, I would love it. It's great. I would recommend it. This is a great place to work. And believe it or not, at a 7 or 8, this is where it goes a little south already. So if you're a 7 or 8, they call you a passive. And passive, I like to call those are your buts. So it's, yeah, I'd recommend working here, but something, but this, but that. And so, there's some reason why they're a little hesitant to fully recommend it. Yeah. And then from 6 down, and this has been kind of my experience, I guess. 6 and 5 are still a little bit like the 7, 8, the butts, but instead of start positive but negative, it's start negative but a little bit of positive.
Right.
And 4 and below is just they're trashing us. Like they hate it here. They don't want it. There's So that's typically the way it goes. So the way the whole thing works, basically, the passives are just ignored. And what you look at is your percentage of promoters minus your percentage of detractors. So the highest possible ENPS score would be 100. The lowest possible ENPS score would be -100 if you had 100% detractors.
Okay.
So yeah, and basically like your world class companies could be like 40s and 50s. Typically, there's like few companies in the world of any industry that are in like the 60s and 70s.
Okay.
Yeah. So, but
So
typically on our scale to like move the needle, like you're looking at six to 12 months, 1 or 2 points in that time period is it's respectable. So,
right. Okay.
So it's if a company measures their ENPS, landing between 40 and 50 is amazing, and I guess around the 20, 30 is honorable, and under you can start asking questions to the managers about how they work and what you guys do and how to fix that.
yeah, I mean, it's basically flat out like anything above zero is considered, like okay, like you're
It's
not
okay.
dying.
Okay.
Anything under
Okay.
zero is considered bad, but you're kind of like good measurements, and of course it varies by region, by industry. Believe it or not, banks, man, they're really high. They have some of the highest ENPS scores, which blows my mind because I remember when I was a kid, I hated my bank. Like not a kid, when I was like 18, just getting my first bank account, I hated my bank. But
Yeah.
anyway, now they're so good. Restaurant industry is a little tougher. So in the restaurant industry, if you're more like floating around the 20 mark, you're considered like really good. So and again, it does vary by region, but yeah, that's like where you're starting to look like really good. And then of course some companies go up or down from there.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. And maybe I'd like to understand from you, in the journey of improving the corporate culture, improving the culture in the company, and working on all this. What obstacles could you face? You mentioned earlier, if the top management is not on board, it's good luck doing that. Is there anything that we should watch out for or be mindful of when we want to work on our corporate culture?
I think. I mean, yeah, like the top leadership. That's one thing, but I would say like one thing that I definitely would say I face. It's kind of like, okay, so we've got to work with like every restaurant manager or every department head or whatever, and it's like changing behavior is hard. Like,
Yeah.
when someone's got a certain way that they do things, and you come in and, like one example I could give is like, we started introducing the idea of what we call a shout out board. And
Okay.
the shout out board is basically, it's this we got a little Formex board, and on it, it's, says like, give a shout out, and it's got some little graphics and stuff. And the idea is that you hang that up in your store, and then there's a bunch of sticky notes, and you write a shout out to someone, and then you put the little sticky note up on the board. And it's a cool idea, and it's a way to to show gratitude or appreciation or recognition, or but what you face when you try and roll something out like that, is, okay, this is something else I have to do. Like a restaurant manager might say something like, oh, now I got to do another thing. I got to, promote this thing, or I got to do that. And they don't immediately see like, the value of like, why would I bother with this? Why am I going to, go out of my way to do this shout out board thing? It doesn't make any sense to me. And so I think one of the things that we face is the educating, to point out to them, like, the power of things like gratitude or appreciation or recognition, and why it makes sense, because if we don't have them on board, if they're not, down with it, we're gonna, we might show up in a store and, do it one time, but that's the only time it ever happens, and so
Yeah.
so there is kind of like a resistance to it. And so sometimes like some of the efforts that we do or some of the things we want to do, they might be operational changes or behavioral changes or anything like that. And so I would say one of those challenges is to really to overcome that and get the buy-in from them of like why this makes sense. I guess where we've found success, like with the shout out board in particular, like to continue with that example, when we first rolled it out, we saw about 20% adoption in this one. But what ended up happening is we have sort of a social media platform that we use internally And people started posting about it, and they would post like pictures of their shout out board, and they would post pictures from, we do a monthly thing called a WOW party. And during the WOW party, people would be putting their sticky notes up on it. And there were literally like partners crying as they were like, giving recognition and talking about each other and, in these videos that they're posting on this. And so kind of where we found the success, and it on this one, it almost happened accidentally, is you get the example stores, and now we've got about a 60% adoption rate on our shout out boards, and people are more excited about it, and really like it, but in that, we can see it reflected in our survey results, and people talk about, like the focus on it, and people directly have called out like the shout out boards and things like that. But sometimes like that's what it takes is kind of finding those champions, to help drive through that. And you've got to prove it sometimes. And I would say like, that's a huge challenge, because not everybody is a big believer in that whole, like, oh, if people are happier and more engaged and connecting more at work, then it's going to make a difference in their performance or in their sales or in their, the way they treat customers and guests and how much repeat business that generates, or, and so you have to start with a little bit of heavy education, and sometimes you have to find your champions and then, lead by example through them.
Joe, thank you. Thank you so much for your time today, for walking us through the insides of Pizza 4P's and how you guys deliver the wow and share the happiness with the customers, but also with your partners internally. And I think that's the wrap for this episode. Thank you.
All right, you bet.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode until the very end. Take a moment to reflect on what you've learned just today. If you don't, you'll have forgotten most of it in a week from now. What I choose to remember from my conversation with Joe is how, by teaching people the overall value and objective of where you want to go, you can achieve so much more than just telling people every single item that they have or shouldn't be doing. This is so much more efficient and leaves so much space for your collaborators to be creative around problems and find new solutions. That's it for this episode of Cambodia Workwise. See you next time. And if you want to reach out, feel free to go to Instagram and reach out to me at Cambodia Workwise. That's Cambodia Workwise in one word. See you there. Bye.